Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome to my channel! My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my January reading review video. This is the video where I briefly talk about all the books I read. I kind of rank them. Start with the worst and go to the best. And I talk about all the books I read this month. And so I'm going to do that in this video. But this one's probably going to be a little bit longer than most of my reading reviews because I have so many books to get to. Normally, January is like an average month for me reading. I get quite a few books done, but it's not crazy usually because school ramps up. I'm a teacher. Work ramps up, all that type of stuff. And this month, we had just a confluence of events happen. We had some snow days. We had some days off because of holidays. We had some days off because of the previous break. We had some things happen that we had to close the school, some pipe issues that had to close the school. So a bunch of things happened. We didn't go to school that much in January. We still went to school, 7 or 8 days this month, but not a lot. And so I had a ton of time to read. At the same time, I hit some really weird feelings where I was just plowing through books, and it was like I'm just going through. And so I normally read 8 to 12 books. That's a pretty normal range. Occasionally in the summertime I'll go above that or something, but 8 to 12 is a very average range for me. Well, I did not do 8 or 12. I did 19 books. In terms of number of books, this is the most number of books I've ever done in a single month. 17 novels, 1 short story collection, 16 novels, 1 novella collection, 1 short story collection, and 1 manga. So 19 books total. And my previous record was, I think, from July of last year when I did 18 books. And you might say, well, those books were longer, maybe. No, this is the most pages I've read in a month. My previous record was like 6,800 pages in a month. I'm at like 7,200 pages. So boy, was this a great month. And normally I do like maybe 3,500, 4,000, 4,500 pages in a month. So this was a crazy month for me. Now, I read some bad books, 2 books that I would categorize as bad. I read like about 5 or 6 mediocre books, and then the rest were good or great books. So the video's going to start out negative, and it's going to get super positive at the end. So trust me, I start out with a 1 star out of 10, 1 out of 10, and I also go to a 10 out of 10 in this video. So I had just like the craziest range of reading in a month. So let's get into it. So the worst book, we got to start with the worst, was Shigiri and the Brass Head of Oboluphon. Normally, I try to find something positive to say about a book. Nothing positive to say about this book. The morals of this book, the themes of this book, the characters, the plot, the action, the structure of the book. Normally, I have something I can pull out and be like, that was well done. No, I didn't like any of it. Any of it. Yes, it's a different culture that this book is based off the specific African mythology, and so I was willing to read about a new mythology. But no, none of this book worked. Absolutely none. So, it was awful. So that's a 1 out of 10. Did not like that one. The next one is a dislike, but it's not that bad. I read Star Wars MedStar #1 Battle Surgeons. This is by Michael Reeves and Steve Perry. And I really like their individual works. And so I was like, maybe this one will work really well for me. And it just didn't. I didn't care for it. I didn't like it at all. Not at all. I did like it a little bit. This is basically Star Wars MASH. And so if you've watched the TV show MASH, it's kind of like that. And I get what they were going for in this. And there are some really sweet, intimate moments with some of the surgeons that are really cool. I really liked those moments. And there's one moment with Barisafi that I really liked. Other than that, the majority of this story, I was just like the plot, the spy stuff, just none of it really worked. None of it was interesting. And so it was just such kind of a boring book, to be honest. So I just didn't like this one. So this is a 4 out of 10. Those are the 2 books that I disliked. Now we're going to talk about the 6 books that I thought were pretty mediocre or kind of good in places. So I'm just going to go through those. I also read Star Trek Gateways, book 1 of 7, One Small Step by Susan Wright. This is the first book in the Gateway saga. This is a very short read. It's 200-something pages with really large font and spacing. And so as a Star Trek novel, it just didn't do much for me. It was was too reliant on you having seen a certain episode of the television series. The action just wasn't great in this book. It was really slow moving, and it went crazy fast at the end. And I didn't care for it that much. I did think it was competent though. I thought the book was competently designed, and so like I gave it like a 5 out of 10. I thought it was okay. It was mediocre. It wasn't a good book, which is sad. Hopefully, I'm reading the next book next month. Hopefully that's better. I also read Sands of Dune, which is a short story collection, short story / like novella. It's 4 stories. It's 160 pages, and it's super short read. And this book, as a mass market paperback at like $10, might be worth it if you're a big Dune fan. But at a hardcover for $25, $26, and no, it's not worth the price of the book. And I'm a big Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson fan. I am a big Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson fan. And in fact, one of their other books made it onto the list this month. But no, I did not care for this Dune book, which is sad. Probably my least favorite book in the Dune saga that I've read. So there's that one. I also read Star Wars Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster, the original sequel to Star Wars. And this was written back in like 1977, 1970, and released in 1978, just in case if the movie Star Wars had, not been successful, Lucasfilm wanted a story that he would have already in the can, ready, that would be really cheap to produce. And so the entire book takes place on this kind of swampy, muddy planet, something that they could do entirely on sound stages. So he could do it for really cheap. And the book's just not that great. It's got a few cool moments. There's a cool fight between Luke, Leia, and Vader at the end of the book in the last chapter. That's really a fantastic fight. And also, it's got a few character interactions with some of the locals on the planet that is kind of cool. But just as a story, it's just so boring. It's just so small scale. It feels like it loses some of the magic of Star Wars, and it feels like it could have been any other sci-fi book. Replace Vader with some other generic villain, and replace Luke and Leia and stuff, and like it would just been another science fiction book. And I was just like, it wasn't that great. So it was mediocre. I'm gonna give it a 5.5 out of 10. I also read a duology. It's called the Space Excursions duology. The first book was called Back to the Moon. The second book's called Onto the Asteroid. I'll talk about Back to the Moon later in this video because it's amazing. But Onto the Asteroid is a good book. It's not great. It's just good. It has some good moments. It overdoes a few things too many times. A few tropes. I'm just like, okay, I'm done with this trope. But it had some cool moments in it. And it is by Travis Taylor and Les Johnson, both NASA scientists. They're great writers generally. Just this book I thought was like a 6.5 out of 10. Not their best. And but it had some really cool moments. It's basically there's this asteroid heading to Earth, and NASA works with this private company, Space Excursions. It's like SpaceX. This was written before that. But anyway, Space Excursions, and also works with the Chinese and stuff. And they try to basically send men to the asteroid to move the asteroid. And they actually have some good scientific explanations for why they would do it. So I really thought this book was mediocre. I thought that it had some good moments, but it was not as good as the first book. I also read the book Requiem for the Sun by Elizabeth Hayden. This is the 4th book in the Symphony of Ages. The Symphony of Ages is 3 trilogies, and I read the first trilogy a couple years ago, loved some of the books, and thought the first and third book, thought the middle book was kind of okay. This book has some cool moments. There are some top tier, this was written so well in this book. And then there's some moments that I was like, this is so boring, please move on. Don't focus on this character anymore. And so Elizabeth Hayden wrote a very mixed book here. So this one I gave like a 6.5 out of 10. I love the main characters of Rhapsody, and I love the character of Ash, and I love the character of Grunther, and I love some of that stuff, but then the minor characters, I just don't care. So there's that book. I also read a nonfiction book that I talked about on the channel, so I'll talk about here, and that's Modern Family, the untold oral history of one of television's groundbreaking sitcoms. This is a, it's a behind-the-scenes look at the show, and there's some really fascinating elements of behind the scenes that this book gets into, and it's very jarring when you read it because it's just interviews. It's just people's like quotes from different people strung together, and occasionally there's like text from the actual author, but it's mostly just quotes from interviews and stuff. So that's why it's an oral history, and it was jarring to read, but it was interesting, especially if you're into Hollywood production and the business of Hollywood, which I am into the business of Hollywood. I think the book's overlong. I think it focuses on some things it shouldn't and omits some discussions that it should have. Yet, I think that it was still a very entertaining read. I think I gave it like a 6.5 when I read it, but you know what? I think it deserves a 7. I think this was a 7 out of 10 read. Very informative. If you're into the show Modern Family, certainly will read it. And if you're into the business of Hollywood, would be very enlightening. So that's that book. Let's see. I also read a science fiction novel, Freelancers of Neptune. If the Onto the Asteroid was like as hard science fiction as it gets, Freelancers of Neptune is as soft sci-fi as it gets. This is just a fun space adventure featuring different types of species and races and stuff. And it's Firefly meets Ringworld, which is the perfect description of this book. And it's just got such cool world building, such cool ideas. The plot's not the strongest, but the plot's okay. And the characters were really fun to read. So I had a blast with this. It's very fun and adventure. If you like Han Solo and like the Han Solo trilogy from Legends, you'll probably enjoy this book. So yeah, that was Jacob Hollow's Freelancers of Neptune, the first book in the proposed Soul Blazers series. Now we're getting into some really good books, and I read a Star Wars book, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, edited by Kevin J. Anderson. It's got 5 different authors. It's 5 novellas, and each novella focuses on a different bounty hunter. Though one of the novellas is 2 bounty hunters, but yeah, each novella is 1 bounty hunter. And 2 of the novellas were mediocre. One of the novellas was pretty good. That's the one about Boba Fett. But then you had 2 novellas at the beginning of the book that were superb, amazing, and those were the Dengar story and the IG-88 story. The book's worth those 2 stories alone. Fantastic stories. But the book as a whole, I enjoyed quite a bit. I think I gave it like a 7.5 out of 10. It's a pretty good book. I liked it better than Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina. So yeah, I had a blast reading that one. Speaking of having a blast, I also read the very light book, Salvage Fleet. This is just light reading. It's just a fun space opera type book where these guys, this is the second book in a trilogy. These guys they got the rights to have a salvage title to kind of do salvage work, and they end up being one of the only ships that's able to kind of protect their section of the galaxy from an alien invasion. And it's silly, it's goofy, it's fun, it's delightful. I had a blast. I think it's better than the first book even. So I gave it like an 8.5 out of 10. I had a blast, absolute blast reading this book. I also read the book Falling into Oblivion by Aaron M. Payne. This is a cyberpunk mystery book, and it's very atmospheric, and Aaron does a tremendous job making the book feel cyberpunky, and the mystery, I think, was excellent in this book, and the main character was really fleshed out well, and there are some excellent themes in this book about men providing for their family, and also about corruption among police officers that I thought were superb. So this book was really good. I gave it like an 8.5 out of 10. Really good book. Absolutely enjoyed it. And I also not only did I interview Aaron Payne, but I also interviewed this month Jacob Hollow. So just look up their names, Aaron Payne or Jacob Hollow, and then my name, Jonathan Cohn, and you'll find my interviews with them. But yeah, I had a blast with this one. I also dipped into some manga. Technically, I'd read some manga years ago, but I'm not really counting that. So I made a concerted effort to read a lot of manga in 2025. And I started out, first day of the year, January 1st, I read the first 3 volumes of One Piece. And this is a manga about a boy who wants to be king of the pirates. And it's delightful. It's fun. It's sweet. It's surprisingly very detailed, and I really enjoyed the action and adventure in this book. And the main character, Monkey Luffy, is delightful to read. And I have many more volumes to read, and I really like these omnibuses because it's 3 volumes together for the price of really just one. They sell these at about the price that a single volume sells for, and it's absolutely worth the price point in my opinion. So yeah, I really enjoyed this bind up of One Piece volumes 1 through 3, and I will be reading in February volumes 4 through 6. All right, and we're getting some good books here. I also read Dune: The Butlerian Jihad by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. Again, I talked about their short fiction collection, what I didn't really particularly care for. This one was excellent. There are some great deep themes about AI in this book, some great action scenes and battle scenes, some heart-wrenching scenes about torture, and some great scenes with some certain characters. Serena Butler, who the Butlerian Jihad is named after, you feel for her so much. And I just thought that they knocked it out of the park with this book. They did a great job with this book. It's just fun, it's interesting, and you get quite a lot of story in here. And I was just so connected to the main characters here. So I really loved this book. And that one also was just so good. I also read, now the best Star Wars book I read this month. Normally I read 1 or 2 Star Wars books. This month I did 4 because I was, breezing through stuff. My best Star Wars book I read this month was Red Harvest. This was such a good book. This is by Joe Schreiber. This is a zombie book for Star Wars. And if you just want a book about Star Wars zombies, and it's about a girl Jedi who gets captured and brought to this planet with Sith. And then several zombies show up, and she basically is trying to escape it, and she becomes like a final girl, like in a horror movie. It was so good. It was executed so well. I didn't love Death Troopers. I loved this one. Had such a blast. And again, it's really short, so it's worth the read. So yeah, this book was really fun. Each of the next books I'm going to talk about, I thought might be my book of the month. Honestly, each of my next ones, I was like, any of these could have been the book of the month. They were all so good. But then just one of the 4 just stood out head and shoulders above the rest. So it has to be that. But all 4 of these, any other month, probably would have been the book of the month. Because they were all so good. So I read John Grisham's The Confession, which is a legal thriller. There is a guy on death row in Texas who's innocent. And the real murderer, who should be on death row but isn't, is up in Kansas, and he's a free man. And so he goes to this pastor and confesses his sins and convinces the pastor to take him down to Texas to try to stop the execution. And it's very much a thriller because you've got a countdown of when the execution's going to come up. And any other writer would have followed a very specific path for this book. And John Grisham said, no, I'm going to flip the script, and the second act of the book going into the third act, whoo, boy, I didn't see that coming. And he just completely wrenches the story in another direction that was just beautiful and deep themed, and I disagree with so much, but was so well done. And so this is like a 9.2 out of 10. This is such a good book. Such a good book. So good. I also read Back to the Moon by Les Johnson and Travis Taylor. Remember when I talked about Onto the Asteroid earlier this month? Well, I also read Back to the Moon. This is the first book in the duology, and this is amazing. It is amazing, top-tier hard science fiction book. This is like, if you love For All Mankind, the TV show, you will love this book. This book is about basically some astronauts get stranded on the moon, and so they're Chinese astronauts, so America sends their own astronauts back to the moon for the first time in decades, and they go there, and they have limited time to save the Chinese astronauts, but it's very hard science fiction. All the science makes sense. It's very adventure oriented. There's some really high stakes, and it really gets really tense at the end, and there's some great ideas about business and about government and how to do space exploration, and it's very hopeful for the future, and this book is amazing. The sequel is just okay, but this book is worth it. If you are interested in delving into hard science fiction, but you're like, Ben Bova's series is huge and you don't want to commit to that. Or, you're just looking for kind of like what could be a standalone. Technically, as I said, this is the start of a duology, but this could be a standalone because this book by itself is amazing and I loved it. 9.2 or 3 out of 10. I also read a historical fiction book this month that I absolutely loved. And it read kind of like a fantasy novel. And that was Maurice Druon's The Iron King. This is a story set in medieval France where it's basically about a huge scandal that happens at the same time that the king has done some really just kind of egregious stuff. And it's about this power struggle that happens and this the start of a war. And it's the first book in a series called The Accursed Kings. And this book, The Iron King, was a superb opening segment of the series. And I loved this book. And it's if you like fantasy, but you don't want magic system, you just want that classic medieval setting, the politics of Game of Thrones type stuff. If that's what you want, this is what you should read. It deals with some scandalous stuff in an appropriate way that I really thought was excellent. So yes, The Iron King was such a good book and such a short book as well. And this could have been my book of the month, except for the final book that I'll talk about. This next book that I read was so caught me off guard. I was not expecting it to be this good because I've not really heard people hype it up that much. Actually, I take it back. There's one person I know who hyped it up quite a bit. But this book, I picked it up a few years ago and it's been sitting on my shelves and I've been wanting to get to it because I love the author, and that's Timothy Zahn. But I've had so many other Timothy Zahn books to get through. So I put it on my TBR for this month. And I read The Green and the Gray. And let me tell you, this is a 10 out of 10 book. This is about two alien species that crash landed on Earth. And they go to New York City, and they basically form gangs in New York. People don't they blend in with the humans, but they're really aliens, and they end up having a gang war, kind of like in a West Side Story. And so it's all about this girl, Melantha, who is going to be sacrificed to keep the peace. And so these humans, this human couple, finds Melantha and decides, no, we are going to protect her. We're not going to let this sacrifice go through. And it becomes this huge story and this huge thing to keep the humans from knowing what's happening. And also, there's all this mystery and there's these action and what these random stuff that like humans couldn't possibly do are happening. People climbing up buildings and stuff. And it is just delightful from page 1 to the end. And it is shocking in moments, and the end of the book has this tremendous twist, and there's so many twists leading up to it, and the characters are so great, and the book really deals with some really complex themes. It was written right after 9/11, and it deals with some difficult stuff, but Tim Zahn, in a way only he can, handles it magnificently. It's a true 10 out of 10. And it's been a year and a half since I gave a 10 out of 10. It's been 2.5 years since I gave a 1 out of 10. So it's been even longer since I gave that. But this was a 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. Oh, it is absolutely worth the price of the book, whatever format you can get. And I cannot wait to read more books by Zahn. And it's a standalone. So if you're like, I just want a quick standalone, I mean, it's not that quick. It's it's pretty, word count pretty long, but it's a great science fiction book. So I absolutely recommend The Green and the Gray. So those are all the 19 books. So many books that I read this month. But it's so good. So if you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments section down below what you thought about them. And what books did you read in January, and what are you looking forward to for the future? Let me know those thoughts in the comments section. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.